We're on the north side of the Shuswap Lake. This is where a wildfire tore through 170 homes and businesses last summer. It's also where a group of residents defied evacuation orders, staying behind to fight the fires themselves. At the time, they accused the BC Wildfire Service of mismanaging the fire. We're here to find out if that's something they still believe and hear about any other concerns they might have as a new wildfire season approaches.
Oh my God.
We saw it the night before, huge, like mushroom cloud up above those hills.
But there was no controlling that day.
The North Shuswap was being ignored.
I have lost trust in the BC Wildfire Service.
Maybe one or two things that could have been done different.
I don't have any hard feelings towards them at all. They did the best they could possibly do.
The wildfires in BC's Shuswap region started in mid-July, caused by lightning strikes. The human impact minimal until August, when the flames started pushing towards small communities along the lake. Jim Cooperman, a forestry activist in Lee Creek, fled. The fire burned right up to his house. His past efforts to fire smart the property paid off.
If those trees had been there, if that forest had been there, the fire would have still had so much velocity, it would have come right through our property and could have burned all the homes down below us.
Yeah. So you've had this property for quite some time, Mike.
Since 1968, moved here from the States as a war resister in 1969. And I designed and built the house.
And the year after you fire smarted it, a wildfire hit.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm an environmentalist, and I've been concerned about wildfires and promoting fire smarting. And who does the fire hit? Us. The irony is just so thick you could cut it with a knife.
Yeah. Cooperman's among many local critics of the BC Wildfire Service, specifically in its decision to light a planned ignition on August 17th.
And the fire was like a blowtorch coming out of that canyon,
which he believes contributed to the spread of the fire down the mountainside.
Then we find out that the Wildfire Service is planning to do a backburn, which is a 10-kilometer long aerial ignition, just 2 kilometers from our house. And just prior to a windstorm, we were all totally freaked right out.
The planned ignition or backburn was set up along this stretch of power lines. The goal was to proactively burn up a swath of dry forest to stop the wildfire from spreading past it. The power lines would serve as a fire control line.
I want to be perfectly clear. That planned ignition saved hundreds of homes and properties along the North Shuswap. Unfortunately, with the wind that we knew was forecast and that was coming, that fire went above the control line that we burned off from and then swept back into the communities in the North Shuswap.
Retired Kamloops forester Bruce Morrow agrees to take us up to see the backburn. Scorched forest lines the old logging road leading up to it.
It means we're losing wildlife habitat, we're losing water values, we're losing visuals, we're losing recreation, and we're losing our forest industry.
Logging machinery renders the site inaccessible by vehicle, but our drone gets a bird's eye view of the planned ignition site, showing swaths of burnt trees on both sides of the Wildfire Service's control line.
Yeah, the planned ignition is probably something to do with why this area burnt. Well, as you can see, there's no leaves left on these trees, so this is a crown fire through here, and this would have come through here in minutes.
Satellite images show just how far the fire burned beyond the control line after the winds picked up. Those on the ground had little time to act.
This is the house here. That's where the wood heater was.
That was the landing for our porch was right here. This was a log house. We built it 48 years ago pretty much from the sticks and stones that are in the front yard, so to speak.
Rod Puffenbarger and Alana Stearns fled their home.
All of a sudden, we got a knock on the door from a neighbor not any alerts on our phone
No.
to say, get out, the fire's here. So we just scrambled
It was
out.
an hour and a half or 2 hours
It was
later
about
that we
2
got
hours
that.
later before we got the actual alert on our phone.
Walk out on the back porch, and it sounded like a jet airplane coming down the canyon here.
Yeah.
It was frightening. It could make your hair stand on end. And that picked up the pace considerably.
The fire moving faster than evacuation orders could be issued. While Rod and Alana left, many others stayed behind, trying to protect their property. Provincial officials told them to leave.
If you are under an evacuation order, you must leave immediately. This isn't a suggestion, it is the law. You're making a highly dangerous situation even more dangerous for everyone involved.
Alana Stearns among many who were frustrated by the province's messaging.
They're getting arrested. People in Inglemont running out of food. They're trying to help boat stuff over. Like, where's the logic in that?
People safe is number one, right?
I just felt that the North Shuswap was being ignored at the time. All the media attention was Colona, Colona, Colona.
Those who did stay behind confronted with a rapidly moving inferno. This marina among the front lines where residents battled flames overnight.
So this is, one of our water trucks that we have rigged. It's obviously just a dump truck with, a tank and a pump. And, if this thing could talk, boy, it saved so much of this area. It's just incredible.
Marina manager Mark Acton says he sprung into action well before evacuation orders went out. What do you make of the messaging that the province, BC Wildfire Service put out at the time, telling people to get out, you're putting people's lives at risk, obey evacuation orders?
A lot of people do need to leave, but anybody that's actually, able and willing to help, that they have the assets and the equipment, and they know this area, the locals know the area. Nobody knows the bush in their backyard better than the locals. And, if the locals did not stay, this whole town would be in a lot worse shape.
All right. Acton takes us on a tour of the area where his locals got to work.
Myself and my two neighbors, both my age, we both gave up on our houses because it was coming so fast.
Wow.
And we just stuck to the marina. But then we were up this way, and we managed to, keep the fire in the ditch line here, stopped it right here. I had a loader in my neighbor's yard and put the fire out at his woodshed, his fence line, and that tree.
Residents scrambled to keep the fire from spreading to the nearby Shuswap Lake Provincial Park.
If this park was gone, there'd be, for most people, no reason to come here. I have lost trust in the BC Wildfire Service. It was just very, very poorly planned.
BC's Forest Practices Board is investigating the planned ignition after complaints were lodged by Shuswap residents. The Forestry Ministry says the Wildfire Service welcomes the review. Meanwhile, Acton and his neighbors say they're even more prepared if another fire comes along. But further east, where most of the forests remain intact, residents fear the risk of a future burn is even higher.
When it came over the top, here, Frank Riley's barns had already burnt from a hot amber. And I was on the D7 cat of Frank's and just putting a guard around his hayfields and stuff. And I looked up, and Martin Lucas lives just on our neighbor here. I said, Martin, it's Crastides. I don't want to look up. And within minutes, it started coming down. And when I put that D7 cat in idle, you could hear the roar of that fire, literally.
Yeah. Local lumberjack Carl Bischoff fought the fire on its easternmost flank.
We had about probably 30 to 40 guys here on both sides with about a dozen pickups and the big water trucks and whatever. And we chased it for 9 days before the redcoats showed up. I mean, where are they?
Redcoats meaning BC Wildfire Service workers?
And it's nothing personal.
Yeah.
I always call them redcoats. It's all good. But if they have, the part we find disturbing is they don't have enough soldiers to fight the war. So just call upon us. It's so simple. And we have lots of knowledge.
Bischoff is putting together what could be called a citizen fire brigade, composed of registered tree fallers and residents who have taken BC's basic fire suppression course.
We're just going to be a little small little fire brigade. We see smoke, no strings attached, we're going to go after it until forestry shows up. And if we're told to go home, we'll go home. But they're going to maintain it and they're going to put it out. And what we're going to do here is use this as our fire trailer. And next week we've got about another $4,000 to $5,000 worth of hoses and pumps coming. But it's just the basics. We had to do something so that we're ready.
The regional district's elected director for the North Shuswap supports Bischoff's plans and residents getting trained. He says it will allow them to legally stay behind in the event of future evacuation orders, as long as they work with Wildfire Service.
BC Wildfires will take them and put them where they're needed with the regular BC Wildfire crews. Those people who don't actually sign up and work with BC Wildfires will be under the same evacuation orders as everybody that isn't trained, and they may or may not go with that evacuation order. It's going to take a while for that trust to come back. We need to have better communication with BC Wildfires, and certainly communication, I think, is the biggest challenge that we had last year.
Changes that could be on the way soon. In response to the fires, an expert task force made a series of recommendations to the province, including pathways for local community involvement during wildfires. The goal is to build better communication, cooperation, and trust. The Premier has pledged to follow through with them.
There's an emergency. We don't want to be dealing with conflict on the ground. We want to be working together as a unified whole. So this was one of the specific areas that I asked the task force to look at. How do we better integrate local knowledge? How do we better integrate local people into our fire response?
Also included in the recommendations is to enhance post-wildfire supports, a service some victims say is desperately needed here, as many still struggle to rebuild.
This was our house. It's hard to put into words, but everything we had is now gone. And at our age, you know, it's going to be pretty much impossible to rebuild. So, you know, just try and move forward if we can. You know, it's been 7-8 months now. We're still homeless. We have a roof over our head, but it's not our home. It's just that overwhelming feeling of loss.
CBC's cameras captured the aftermath of the fire at Richard Gibbons' property. He lost his home, camper, boat, vehicles, and countless personal belongings. None of it was insured.
We've tried every avenue we can to try and, I guess, secure some kind of a recovery fund if it's available. Unfortunately, nothing is available for us because we were renters and we were uninsured. Basically, that falls back onto us for being uninsured.
Despite his momentous loss, he says he's not pointing the finger.
I feel that the fire service did everything that they possibly could. You know, they put their life on the line to save ours. I don't have any hard feelings towards them at all. They did the best they could possibly do. Weather, that was a huge factor in how the fire turned and how it swept through here. They can't control weather. I give them kudos.
There's a lot of pointing fingers and everything. You know, there's maybe 1 or 2 things that could have been done different, but there was no controlling that day.
Squilac's First Nation Chief James Toma also doesn't place any blame.
Even at my level, people, well, why didn't you do something about it? And I said, if I had the ability to stand in front of that fire until it stopped, you know, I would have, but no.
The day of the fire, Toma was stranded beneath a bridge with his brothers after trying to save their homes.
We looked at each other and said, this might be it, eh? We said, I love you and everything and that. We ended up being trapped under the Little River Bridge, and some very brave boys from Adams Lake launched a boat and said, we're coming to get you.
34 houses burned down here, Toma has pledged to rebuild all of them, a project that's already well underway.
That goes to show if properly done with the right people in place, you can achieve this in a short time, because sadly there's communities out there that suffered a wildfire loss that still haven't recovered.
Opinions as to whether the wildfire could have been avoided are split, but one thing is certain: the damage is done. Communities like this show that rebuilding is possible with the right leadership and supports, but also serve as a reminder of what's at stake as BC faces more hot and dry summers in the future.